Let's discuss the implications of today's Constitutional Court decision with my colleague and host of Power to Truth here on eNCA, Dr JJ Tabane. JJ, thank you so much for your time this evening. First of all, what are the consequences of this Constitutional Court decision for the public protector's fight to avoid impeachment, do you think?
Look, I think it has weakened her case because, remember, she's always argued that, a lot of people, lose cases, etc. That's why we've got all these multiple layers in our judicial system where, the higher court can overrule the lower court, etc. But that obviously has always been a poor argument because it is not about the fact that people can review her decisions. It's about, why she gets it wrong and the kind of pronouncements that the courts have made about her inability to grasp the basics as an advocate, the basics as a lawyer. And that is a problem. It's not about interpretation also. It's also about her integrity. The courts have pronounced at least on 3 judgments, Sally, that she's been dishonest or she twisted the facts or she got it wrong on the facts and the law. And all of that concoction of poor assessment or evaluation by her peers. Because remember, judges are her peers. That is giving her a bad name and it's weakening her case. In other words, when the impeachment process does start, right, after all of the initial disagreements about rules and so on are settled, then it will come to the nub of the issue. Is she fit for purpose? And today's judgment tell us another chapter in the fact that she seems not to be fit for purpose at the moment. So not a good day at the office for her, I'm afraid.
Good news for the president, I suppose, in that regard. But in terms of the Mkhwebane application, which was also part of this, the ConCourt actually finding that the High Court actually got it wrong when it comes to Mkhwebane, which of course was applying to get access to his CR17 campaign donors, the sort of the principle of the transparency. That now has to go back to that High Court for a decision. It may ultimately end up back in the Constitutional Court. But could this ultimately be bad news for the president?
I tell you something, it's actually not a very good day in the office for the president because he won the battle and not the war, Sally. The war on this country right now is a war for transparency, the war against corruption, right? He went into the Nasrec with a ticket of transparency to say, I'm going to be different. I'm not going to be another Zuma. There was 9 wasted years. This terrible person must go. I'm here. And now he behaves exactly like Zuma. He doesn't want us to know who is funding him. He sealed his bank accounts, right? And I hope that the judiciary in the High Court in this Mkhwebane case actually does say the public deserves to know. It's in the public interest that we know that it is SAB who has given you money. And that's why now they think they can be so cocky as to tell us that you don't have a lockdown, people are dying, but I want to sell alcohol, I'm even going to court. Don't you think that would be interesting to find that, in fact, SAB was one of the big funders, and that's why we are tippy-toeing maybe around the alcohol ban or not? Right? I'm just giving that as an example.
Yeah, absolutely.
What could simply clarify matters if you know who is behind a president, who's behind the R500 billion, that's a lot of money to put for charity, right? And also this whole issue that he didn't know, he doesn't know. I mean, how do you give 50 million rand to a campaign and not want the principal to know? Unless we are being taken for idiots.
It cannot work like that. Yeah, and it makes it, it's sort of, there's meant to be this separation, which might explain why he initially thought that Mkhwebane was referring to his son, but at the same time, the transparency issue is a very strong argument, particularly as this is the man who's trying to clean up any dodgy dealings. I have to ask you about...
An ethical question, if I may say, right? So legally he has won the case, he was right. I never believed that he was deliberately trying to mislead Parliament. I think that's crazy, especially that he wrote the letter straight after he got the facts that, look, I was wrong, people err and so on. But That's why the courts were clear that the public protector had to say it was willfully trying to mislead Parliament. So that one we set aside. That's not the war. That's only a battle. The war is this an ethical president that he promised us, or have we been sold a dart?
So I want to ask you about whether today's decision around sending this issue of the keeping these fund donors secret back to the High Court, whether it could ultimately strengthen Ace Magashule's argument. And I'm going to show you my working out, and you tell me if my logic is flawed and what it might mean. So the suspended ANC SG, obviously he tried to suspend Cyril Ramaphosa himself. He cited a criminal case laid with the Hawks over the campaign funding issue. Ramaphosa's lawyer has already pointed out in this, the court case between the two that a full bench of the High Court held there was no evidence of criminality. However, if this issue goes back to the High Court, doesn't it, in a way, doesn't it have the power or the potential to perhaps revive Ace's argument in a way, or not?
No, not, because remember the Mkhwebane were not party to this thing. They came in, as in a sense as an interested party and raised a different angle about transparency, right? So it's a question where you approach the court to clarify a matter whether or not should we be following the law in terms of the party political funding that shows transparency. They're saying once somebody gives you more than 100,000, you must tell us. But how can that not apply in a question of a party funding when those parties eventually are going to be in power? They're going to influence state resources, etc. So it's a question where the law must be tested, is clarified. I think the Ace Magashule faction will be grabbing at straws to say, because the court is now considering a matter like that, that's in all of our public interest, then the person who initiated it or who caused that it be raised as an issue must now suddenly step aside. It ought to be crazy, right? Because he's not being accused in a sense, because that's the law now. Legally, the political parties, internal funding was not a matter that Parliament was interested in. If the court can rule otherwise, that could then become a new law, because as courts decide matters, they also create new jurisprudence, right? So I'm sorry, I don't think they've got anything to hold on to. That devastated by the judgment today, because if the court found against Ramaphosa today, then they would have a case, right? But in terms of the private party funding, the law as we speak now doesn't say if you are Ramaphosa and running internally, you must tell us how much you are. That's why he thinks that it's okay, he must seal his funds. But the issue there is, it is not a legal matter of the sealing of funds. It's an ethical question of integrity, which he promised us. We didn't provoke him. He is the one who said, people are stealing, I'm not going to steal. And Madam Mantashe even, spoke to us as usual like we are idiots, to say, oh, he's a billionaire, it means he won't steal anything, which is crazy.
All right, well, thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. I do appreciate that. That was a colleague and host of Power to Truth here on eNCA, Dr. JJ Tabane.